Whether you're a beginner, an intermediate, or an advanced sewer, overlockers definitely do have their use in your sewing kit, but sometimes you can use a sewing machine to get just as good of an outcome. I've been sewing on and off for the last 15 years and had truly never touched an overlocker until about a year and a half ago. This is when my mum decided that she was going to get rid of her overlocker and she asked if I wanted to adopt it. Now, I don't say no to a free machine, even if I've never considered using it before. So of course I took it on board. But the minute that I got home, I took a look at this overlocker and I thought, what is this? There's so many threads, there's a blade, it's really loud. It's just really daunting and intimidating when you first have a look at it. Overlockers can be handy to have in your kit, but they're not a necessity. So let's first discuss the differences between the two machines so that you can have a better understanding as to whether you need an overlocker in your life or not. As a basic rule of thumb, your sewing machine is going to be used for the bulk of your garment construction, whereas an overlocker will be used to finish the edges professionally and provide that touch more strength. A sewing machine is obviously a necessity in everyone's sewing kit. They're designed to create running stitches of various patterns to attach 2 or more pieces of fabric together. The way that a sewing machine works is it has 2 threads, one at the top of the machine that would come down through your needle and one in the bottom of the machine wrapped around a bobbin. When the needle is pushed into the fabric, it creates a loop which is caught by the thread in the bobbin. This creates a continuous and synchronized stitch between the 2 threads, allowing you to attach 2 or more pieces of fabric together. Sewing machines of all varieties are used for 99% of your garment construction as they have so many varieties of stitches. So this is where something like your sewing machine comes in handy because you do have the option to use various stitches depending on what type of fabric you have. But the one downfall is unless you know a few seam finishing techniques, sewing machines can leave you with some really unprofessional looking edges. This is where an overlocker comes in handy. Now, an overlocker is essentially designed to do one thing only, an overlock stitch. This machine uses 4 spools of thread to create various loops along the edges of your garments, along with a knife, which slices off unwanted parts of your fabric. As the blade cuts along the fabric edge, the overlocking stitch will catch the edge of your fabric, creating a nice, neat edge. This helps you to reduce bulk in your seam allowance, gives you a really clean finish, and provides a little bit more strength to your finished projects. However, an overlocker is not suitable to stitch your whole garment. They're best used in tandem with a sewing machine. So your sewing machine would be used for your tedious garment construction, whereas an overlocker is purely just to finish the edging of your garment. They are also really difficult to thread and align. You've got 4 spools of thread and they all have to be threaded so perfectly for it to work correctly. This is why I rarely change the color of the thread because it's such a punish. Here's the big question. Do you need an overlocker to have professional looking garments? Do you need an overlocker to have professional looking seams? In my personal opinion, I don't really think that anyone needs an overlocker. In the year and a half that I've had mine, I've really only used it, maybe 4 or 5 times. If you don't have a serger or an overlocker and you are wanting to create more of a professional finish to your edges or your seams, there are many ways that you can do it just with a standard sewing machine. Most sewing machines feature what we would call a mock overlock stitch. This would be something like an overcast stitch or a 3-step zigzag stitch, and these can be used to finish your edges. However, as we know, a sewing machine will not have a blade attachment, so it isn't going to slice the edges of your fabric like an overlocker would. It still does provide a nice finish to your seam allowance though. Some other options, if you don't want to use those stitches or you don't have the ability to, would be to incorporate something like flat felled seams or French seams to your garment. Now, this does take a little bit more planning because those 2 seams do require more seam allowance. So it may mean that there's a little bit more work in the pattern drafting process, or you may need to take that into consideration when cutting your fabric from a commercial pattern. So in my opinion, an overlocker is nice to have if you've got one. You can definitely make use of it, but I wouldn't be rushing out and buying one. It might be worthwhile looking at secondhand options, maybe Facebook Marketplace or secondhand sewing stores, or maybe someone's grandmother can pass you on, an overlocker that they're not using anymore. Remember, I got through 15 years of sewing, rarely touching an overlocker. So please don't think that that's an absolute necessary in your kit. So hopefully this video gave you a little bit more insight as to whether you need an overlocker in your life or if you can do without. If you have any questions, please drop them below. I'd be more than happy to help.